Viewing or listening to this podcast confirms acceptance of the disclaimer visible on your screen or found at authorscott.com/podcast. Welcome to the Regaining Health and Humanity podcast. I'm Dr. Scott Johnson, your guide on this journey to natural well-being. Here we explore evidence-based insights, revolutionary breakthroughs, and powerful health strategies that not only inform, but inspire change. Together, we'll uncover the mysteries of human existence and unlock the secrets to thriving. This podcast is more than just knowledge. It's your catalyst for unleashing extraordinary potential. Get ready. Your journey to boundless health and happiness starts now. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Regaining Health and Humanity podcast. I'm excited about today's episode because I have a guest who shares a passion for essential oils and helping people. And we're exploring a topic that is so needed today, particularly finding natural ways to manage PTSD and other mental health problems. Dr. Ray Daniel is a doctor of clinical psychology and licensed clinical social worker. Her studies and clinical work have focused on trauma, suicidal ideation, and crisis intervention. She is a published author, speaker, and researcher. She works with high-risk populations among adolescents and active or retired military. She is a leading pioneer in the field of alternative and complementary medicine, integrating emotional aromatherapy as a valuable intervention for mental health. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Daniel.
Aloha. Thank you so much for having me.
Too many people are overlooking their mental health. And so people are hyper-focused on physical health, but often people will overlook their mental health. And the reality is anything that's going to affect your mental health will also affect your physical health and vice versa. And so we need to give it attention, and we need to bring some more light on the topic of mental health and particularly PTSD. And so I'm excited to have you on and have this discussion.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. And I mean, honestly, mental health isn't just about a diagnosis or someone who has a diagnosis and needs a little extra attention there. It's like a daily thing that I'm focused on within my own life as well.
It is, yeah, for sure. Every one of us needs to look at it, so it's definitely an important topic. I want to start out with talking about the science behind essential oils and mental health. So can you explain the basic science behind how essential oils affect our mental and emotional well-being?
Yeah, well, I think it's actually a very fascinating science. And I think we're used to this as well. Any of us that go into nature and we just smell those scents, we always just feel so good. Well, there's actually a scientific reason why we feel so good. Our neuroolfactory sensory system is closely tied to brain regions that actually govern emotions and memory. So through the neuroolfactory limbic permeation, the aromatic compounds, they coupled with sensory receptors and decoded right into electronic signaling, they influence neurotransmitter alteration, modulation, nerve excitability, sedation, neuron stimulation, neurogenesis, and neuroplasticity. So it's like just through inhaling these little aromatic plant volatiles, they can trigger and produce neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, influence our endocrinological system, neurophysiological brain activity, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and just produce like biomarker changes that actually influence psychological and have behavioral effects on us. So that's kind of a little bit of the sciencey bit of it, but they've also studied in that these mechanisms of action are due to the chemistry, the neurochemistry going on, not for the perception of the scent. So I just think it's fascinating to understand, like once we just inhale something and it starts to kind of like a pinball machine, starts to go to work in the brain.
I think you brought up a couple of important points, and I want to make sure people understood, because people always say, well, just inhaling them, that's just to make a nice scent and it'll make your room smell better or whatever. But it's not. It's such a powerful way to influence our body and our biology and our physiology, because that is the most direct and fastest way to the brain. And so if you really want to influence the brain, which is then downstream going to influence your endocrine system and other activities, then that is a very effective but yet easy and gentle way to experience essential oils. So I hope that people caught on about how powerful that is, that, this is not something that's just going to make your room smell better. They are definitely affecting a lot of the way your body is working and responding. And so it's super important to know that inhalation is a powerful method.
Yeah. And I sometimes think because it's so simple, where we think maybe it's not as effective and powerful, but I love that something so gentle, like you said, and easy that I can just like put a drop in my hand or put a diffuser on, and I am actually influencing my brain chemistry and supporting.
Mm-hmm.
And this because essential oils are more like an adaptogenic, I would say, like they're more modulating, which means kind of they regulate, they don't spike certain, systems in the body. They gently work with us to like
Mm-hmm.
help us sleep or to help our mood or to balance our serotonin. And it's just a simple thing. I mean, I don't go a day without using them for my mental health.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that you mentioned is that this is due to the chemistry interacting with receptors and enzymes and other things in our body. And so it's not just the aroma. There has been studies that they've blinded the aroma so that they knew that the chemistry was what was affecting the body. And that's something that people commonly ask me, well, I've lost my sense of smell, or I have a poor sense of smell, so essential oils probably won't work for me. No, that's not the case. The chemistry will still interact with those receptors and those enzymes and things in your body to give you a response.
Yeah. Well, it's the same with food. If you can't taste it, still when you eat it, it's got nutritional value that's going to be
Right.
going into your system. So
So, what have you found to be some of the most effective essential oils for alleviating anxiety and stress, and how do you recommend using them?
well, and this is a good like core topic because stress really is the gateway to all other mental health, emotional health concerns that we have going on. Really, if we can kind of get it at the stress level, it will impede it from exacerbating maybe some other symptoms or having us be reactive or just it can really be that central foundation for us is stress. So I like that we're talking about this. So when you look at just stress in general, so I did my doctoral dissertation on PTSD. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, PTSD is a maladaptive cycle of stress that doesn't stop. It doesn't know how to stop. You think of one thing in the brain and just boom, your brain just starts to go again into that maladaptive cycle. So at its core, stress is an activation of the HPA axis. So the
Mm-hmm.
HPA axis, just in general terms, we have the hypothalamus in the brain, the pituitary gland, and then the adrenal gland on the kidneys. And
Mm-hmm.
between the brain and the kidneys and throughout the entire body, it releases stress hormones and neurochemicals that are excitatory to kind of get you on that fight or flight, but also it pumps your blood faster. It just kind of amps your body up. So anxiety being similar to stress, it also increases blood, heart rate, and excitatory neurochemicals. So if you want to like just kind of maintain so that all the stressors of the day aren't getting us in an exacerbated state, we would look at mitigating at first at the core those symptoms, the HPA axis, and modulating like other neurochemical systems such as glutamic acid, which is an excitatory
Mm-hmm.
neurotransmitter, and GABA, which is an inhibitor. So those are the systems we want to target. So just in saying that, research has seen compounds such as limonene from citruses, linalool, linyl acetate, which are strong in lavender. They
Mm-hmm.
support regulating these symptoms. But in looking at all three of these, wouldn't it be nice if they were in one essential oil? Well, this is what I did my dissertation. I did it one of the largest literature reviews that's ever been done on mental health and aromatherapy, and I was looking at. So I'm looking at PTSD first off, right, which
Mm-hmm.
has four categories of symptoms, but inside of each of those categories, there's a whole bunch of symptoms. So I had to look at all that neurochemistry and then look at research on essential oils that would most target that HPA axis because lack of, sleep and attention in PTSD is most of the time it's really charged by that HPA axis being on high alert. That's not causing the body to sleep. So, in all of that literature review, there was one essential oil was like my top of the line that hit a lot of those markers of the 4 cluster symptoms of PTSD plus the symptoms inside of those clusters.
Mm-hmm.
And that was bergamot. So I'm a
Okay.
big proponent of bergamot essential oil. It has limonene, linalool, linyl acetate, also beta pinene. And what research showed was that it actually helped with calming the autonomic nervous system and mitigating that cycle of the HPA axis. And so for me, and bergamot smells so wonderful. It's
Mm-hmm.
a soft scent. And mind you, I did my research with military, active
Yeah.
duty, vets as well, and first responders, and all these Navy SEAL guys that I worked with. They loved bergamot as well. So it's definitely not too girly, and it's not like super cologne like smelling. So
Yeah.
um, it's just this perfect medium, I feel like, for that gateway to mitigating the effects of stress.
Right. How does aromatherapy compare to traditional mental health treatments like therapy or medication? I mean, you can use them complementary, but you've already kind of mentioned they're more gentle. How do you tell people when maybe your clients or others who want to incorporate them about how to do that?
I get asked this a lot because essential oils have such a promising future and so many benefits. So what I tell people, medications interact very differently in the brain. And I never advise someone to replace an essential oil with their meds. It's a completely different mechanism of action. And so you definitely need to work with your doctor on what what your body is needing neurochemically with that. But essential oils are such a great complement to brain chemistry. So
Mm-hmm.
you'll see, aromatherapy as a complement can help facilitate the brain's chemistry. And so it can help regulate some of those responses and process those emotions. It's also a great complement for outside of therapy because when I have clients come in my office, I'm having a diffuser, we're talking through things. I'm noticing that clients that I've worked with for, a long time, for many, months, let alone, some of them a couple years without aromatherapy. Um, and then seeing when I bring in aromatherapy, how it causes this physical calming sensation in their body, allows them to process a little bit better those emotions. And so when they're outside of my office, to have something that can immediately stimulate the brain in a way that we did in the office to be able to process, it's a huge compliment. In fact, just to have in your pocket for a stress or anxiety or a trauma trigger, or if you're like feelings of depression start to creep in, grab an essential oil, grab, bergamot. One Marine I worked with, we were talking about the trauma and he triggered his trauma. And I had black spruce essential oil on hand at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a tree oil, excellent as well for calming that HPA axis. And I had him immediately inhale it because I could see everything was starting to like go reactive for him. And it stopped his mental and physical response right then and there. We were able to keep him calm and continue the session. And actually, he was blown away. Usually, he said when the trigger comes, he starts to spiral. And it was just so empowering that I had something to stop that spiral so we could actually work on his trauma and in the therapy session versus go, oh, okay, shoot, now we're just working on mitigating the reaction instead of actually mitigating the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And also so wonderful for him to be able to go home with an essential oil in his pocket, and he could pull on it during the work week, or if he started spiraling, anywhere else, he could just pull on something to help his brain from spiraling.
Right. You mentioned at the beginning, it's something, mental health and emotional well-being is something each of us needs to work on a daily basis. So what is the best way to incorporate aromatherapy into a daily routine to do that?
I think the easiest way, well, I'll share what I did with my research, and why I did this was because it was already proven in research. So for inhalation, um, every 4 to 6 hours, I would have my research participants inhale an essential oil. So
Hmm.
first thing in the morning, you can, and if it's at home, you can just put it in a diffuser or just put a couple drops in your hand, inhale it, and then go on with your day. Midday, also do a couple drops if it's diffuser or if it's in your hands. And then afternoon, like 4 o'clock. So kind of every 4 to 6 hours. And then before bed, put it in a diffuser at night. I love like lavender and copaiba for sleep. And
Hmm.
so just put that in the diffuser. And that way it's just into your brain every, 4 to 6 hours. And in fact, another Marine that I worked with said that while he was at work, one of his buddies who was there at the time of his trauma started talking about the trauma that really causes him a lot of PTSD, flashbacks, and he said that the Marine friend of his was talking about it, and he started to get these reactions. And this guy was in my research study, and so he said he looked at his watch and he said it was about time for his inhalation. He was so glad, and so he grabbed the bergamot, put a couple of drops in his hand, and inhaled it, and said that he just like felt immediately better. And so that for every 4 to 6 hours, just a very powerful way to like keep that chemistry balanced in the brain.
Can you share some research findings on the use of essential oils for managing depression?
Yeah, for sure. And this is something all of us deal with. Now, depression as like a major depressive disorder, there are some things we want to look at targeting, and that could be serotonin or norepinephrine. But on a daily basis, too, feelings of just not feeling happy. Let's talk about that for a second. That is really common. I mean, even I struggle with that, like just not feeling happy. And a lot of that really starts from hormones as well as thought processes, right? So there's quite a few different things going on, but a couple targets that I look at. If it's hormonal related, then I'm going to go to something like a clary sage. I'm going to
Hmm.
go to something that's related to more like a hormone balancing. But one essential oil research that I found that was pretty interesting, and and it's an essential oil I use on a daily basis as well. The study was done on L-menthone, and it's a compound from various plant oils, but peppermint being strong in L-menthone.
Yep.
So peppermint's my choice. I love to put it on the back of my neck. And the study showed that after oral administration, L-menthone had the ability to surpass the blood-brain barrier
Hmm.
and helped restore serotonin levels, causing a reversal in the symptoms of anhedonia, helplessness, and depression. And this was under a chronic stress and depressive induced state on mice. But the study found that it also attenuated pro-inflammatory cytokine expression in the hippocampus, which caused this anti-inflammatory effect that
Hmm.
contributed to the antidepressant-like response. So it's not just like, oh, well, this helps serotonin. It's, well, let's look at what's blocking or look at those channel pathways that actually help serotonin. So peppermint or L-menthone in this case is a great one for improving mood, boosting that energy, improving attention and focus, as well as cooling your temperature. So that would be my top go-to. I'll just say one more real quick, but another study, ylang ylang, it's a flower.
Yeah.
Love the
Hmm.
smell of it. Also supports serotonin concentration in the hippocampus, which improved mood and boost focus.
That doesn't surprise me with the peppermint or the menthone that was ingested, because we know that about 90% of your serotonin is actually produced in your gut. And so most people think, oh, it's all coming from my brain, but it's not. The gut is the biggest producer of your serotonin in the body. And so ingesting it probably had some kind of impact on the gut microbiome and its
Mhm.
production of serotonin.
For sure. I mean, even an anti-inflammatory effect, because inflammation will block the lining of our gut
Hmm.
wall, inhibiting nutrients from getting through that mucosa layer. So it's just, yeah, you're right. I mean, over 95% in the brain of serotonin and even GABA. There are many neurotransmitters that are mostly produced in the gut. So it's our gut is actually where it's at.
Yeah. An estimated 3.6% of the U.S. population experiences PTSD, with women roughly 44% more likely to experience PTSD than men, and a higher prevalence of PTSD among adolescents and people aged 45 to 59. What are some effective ways to use essential oils for PTSD?
Well, from my, research study we did on bergamot, the protocol I just gave you would be like my number one starting point would be
Mm-hmm.
inhaling bergamot morning, midday, afternoon, and then diffusing it at night. And that's what we did in my research study. My research actually is published. You can read it, and I would follow those protocols. We did those for 2 weeks, which was interesting too in the research. So I had little daily notebooks that the participants would fill out, and they would
Mm-hmm.
note down what was happening during the day and what they noticed that was different. Around day 7 or 8, I noticed a very strong trend in the daily notebooks that were saying, I'm noticing that the calming effect is lasting longer. I'm noticing I'm having more strength to calm down or to not spiral. So I would highly recommend doing at least an 8-day protocol of an essential oil to start to regulate those systems. So that would be number one. The second thing, that I found that was interesting for PTSD research, and it was an essential oil I considered. If we could have done internal, which, for my mental health research, we couldn't, we had to do aromatic. But if we could have, I
Mm-hmm.
would have also added turmeric duo capsules. And what I mean by that is curcuminoids, the herb of turmeric, have been studied with PTSD and had great results as well. And then aromatic turmerones have
Yeah.
also been studied, as you know, anti-inflammatory effect as well as neuromodulation and other neurochemistry that helps with PTSD. And so if you combine those two into a capsule, to me, that would be a phenomenal thing to take at least once a day. If someone is actually dealing with PTSD, then I would recommend morning and then evening. The other essential oil that was high, it's the essential oil constituent, is beta carotene, and so that's
Mm-hmm.
BCP. And I'm sure a lot about beta carotene. It's a phenomenal essential oil that binds directly to the cannabinoid receptor 2. And
Mm-hmm.
cannabinoid receptor 2 is what modulates a lot of our anxiety as well as stress responses. It ties into our BDNF, neurochemistry in the brain. And so I would recommend a capsule, again, talking about the gut being that, like, we call it the second brain, but it's kind of like the first, right? The
Yeah.
first mechanism of response. I would say a copaiba capsule, a turmeric capsule, morning and evening, along with bergamot essential oil throughout the day.
I'm glad you mentioned the turmeric, because I think that the aromatic turmerones that are inside turmeric are underutilized, and they are a sleeper natural solution, because there's been a lot of research how that those aromatic turmerones can affect brain chemistry and also neural stem cell development. And so there's a huge potential there. And I also like combining it definitely with the herb, because the curcuminoids are really hard for us to absorb. And one of the ways we can improve that absorption up to 8-fold is by putting the essential oil in with the curcuminoids, because that can increase your absorption dramatically.
Yeah, well, you have the whole plant back together in a
Right.
sense. And from my understanding, and you probably have researched this a lot, it's even more effective to combine aromatic turmerones and the curcuminoid as
Mm-hmm.
a whole plant versus just, like, I know people take a lot of black pepper and
Yeah.
turmeric curcuminoid. So it's even more effective having it in its whole plant compound versus trying to pair it with another plant.
Yeah, for sure. One of the interesting things that I've written about, I've written a blog about this, is scent memories.
Mhm.
And so I want to ask the question, what role does scent memory play in the effectiveness of aromatherapy for mental health, and how can it be harnessed?
Well, I would love to hear, some of your thoughts on this as well, but I would say, my angle might be, a little bit different than what you might contribute. But first off, we have already talked about that essential oil scent is not the primary contributor to the
Right.
mechanism of action happening with neuromodulation or neurochemistry, right? So I think that's really important to know. Another thing was scent memory. Like, I get asked this a lot, so I'm going to kind of talk about the therapeutic part of it. I get asked, well, I have an allergy to cilantro. So will the essential oil cause the same thing if I inhale it? Now, and here's what I tell people. Technically, it wouldn't. However, scent memory is so powerful. So if
Mm-hmm.
someone has had a very bad reaction from eating and they smell when they eat, right? A cilantro, for example, their memory might take over and be like, uh-oh, we got to put on, our histamine response right now because we smell cilantro. So scent memory is very powerful in that way. So I do tell people if they have a, allergy, I would be gentle with it. It's not because inhaling it's going to cause it. It's because your memory might. So on the other spectrum of that for therapy, now, when I have clients and sometimes, what I'll do with them is say, here's a couple different essential oils, smell which one resonates with you. So they smell and they choose, a citrus blend is one of the primary favorites. So they choose a citrus blend. So I have them hold on to that. And as we're processing some of the emotions, I pair or I couple that positive emotion alongside of the citrus essential oil so that when we are processing trauma and it comes up again, I have them go back to smell that citrus so that that scent memory connects them to the present versus spiraling into the past with trauma.
Right. Scent memories are really all about connections to memories and emotions. And that's why you can smell grandma's cookies and automatically you feel like you're in grandma's kitchen getting ready to eat one of her cookies. And so it's really an interesting concept how we can use that scent memory in a positive way, because you can also have negative things. Maybe you had a lot of pregnancy associated nausea, and every time you smelled chocolate that triggered it, and so the next time you smell chocolate it triggers it again. So it's just a fascinating field of research that we probably don't know enough about yet.
Yeah, I had a psychologist that I trained with the aromatherapy, and she was from Canada. And so
Mm.
she also works with people that are first responders and in PTSD. And so I trained her how to use the essential oils in her clinical practice. And she shared with me the results. One person who was at the scene of an accident, the first responder, and he did the same thing. He smelled the essential oils and he chose one that was a blend. And this blend particularly had cinnamon and clove in it. So as I started processing, the trauma came up. And so she said, grab that essential oil. So he inhaled it. And what was funny was it stopped completely the trauma cycle. And he said, whoa, all of a sudden I remembered Christmas and having hot chocolate at Christmas at my grandmother's house because of the clove and cinnamon.
Yeah.
So it completely disrupted the trauma cycle and the spiral.
You focused your research on PTSD, and PTSD has a lot of different symptoms. So when you're looking at targeting PTSD as a whole, what was your goal and what did you find in your research?
So that's a good question. So there's 4 cluster symptoms. One is called arousal, and that's like reactive, heightened, difficulty with attention and focus, difficulty with sleeping because of that arousal type state, right? So there's like a whole bunch of cluster symptoms inside of there. Another one is negative mood, and that can be negative spiraling, depression type of behaviors. Another one is memory, and the memory is the flashbacks and the nightmares and things like that. And then the fourth one, and this is why I say it fourth, is because this was my target. And it's my target indirectly though. And this is avoidance behavior. So the
Mm.
hallmark feature of PTSD is avoidance behavior. And the reason why someone with PTSD wants to avoid is because it onsets all of those other symptoms. So many people with PTSD will not seek treatment because it means having to go in and excite all of these symptoms, all of those other symptoms, and then it's very difficult to deal with. So my target was, how can I mitigate any of these, the 3 cluster of symptoms, right? That will then allow the avoidance behavior to not happen. It's like, wow, I have something that can help me if this comes up. So I don't need to avoid going to therapy because I can actually start processing, and I have a tool that helps me utilize other evidence-based treatments is basically. So that was my goal. So in all of that, I was looking at those arousal and the negative mood were the two main ones. The flashbacks is a hard one to like
Yeah.
figure out how to do, but what was interesting, the bergamot that I chose, it did heavily. It had research in both of those areas with stress, negative mood, sleep, as well as arousal, like focus and attention. So I had quite a few people who reported that in their little daily journals. It was really interesting. They said, I'm noticing that someone started talking about things from my childhood that usually I avoid, but I was able to talk about it. And that for me was like, oh my gosh, like that was like the holy grail. Like that is what we want. Mitigate these symptoms so you don't have to avoid, so you can actually get progressive therapy. So
Hmm.
that's that was the key what I was looking at.
It sounds like during your thesis, you did a massive literature review.
Mhm.
What did you find in the current literature that was existing at the time in relation to PTSD and aromatherapy?
As far as PTSD, so there was one research study that was done called Selexin,
Hmm.
and so that was lavender and a certain dosage of lavender in a capsule, and so
Hmm.
that had some pretty good results. And then there was cardamom was research, and so Selexin, which is lavender, really, but it
Yep.
was targeted with humans. So majority of the research is not targeted with humans. So
Right.
I have to look at, okay, are they doing in rodent models of PTSD? And that's what we do with all medications, right? You
Hmm.
test it against the models and then you take it to the human form. And so essential oils are still kind of in that non-human form, I would say, not all, but cardamom was another one that was interesting that had some research. Another essential oil, which I don't really have access to, was a garwood essential oil. So it's a wood oil that had some research on PTSD. But as far as like the one that was that best heavy hitter that went to the core, which is that HPA axis, that was bergamot. And
Hmm.
bergamot had studies, and limonene had studies, and linalool and linosyl acetate. All of them individually had studies that all contributed to what I was looking for, which that HPA axis to help lessen the need to avoid and to be able to process.
Yeah, I think that it makes a lot of sense with bergamot and how it would be effective because it's kind of like lavender and orange had a baby
Right.
because the chemistry is combined of those two oils, and you can find studies
Right.
on orange and you can find studies on lavender, both having an effect on stress and anxiety and mental health in general. And so when you can put the chemistry of both of those oils into a single oil, it would make sense that it could be a very powerful essential oil for your mental health and emotional well-being.
It's one of my absolute favorites. Mhm.
What are some of the common findings in your study on PTSD?
Yeah. Some of the common findings I would say, I kind of mentioned, so I'll reiterate that after
Hmm.
8 days, the effects were lasting longer. So I think that's important to understand because sometimes we do something, and even day one, most people said, "Yeah, I felt a little calmer." And some, I think maybe one or two people are like, "I didn't really notice anything," but most people said I felt a little calmer. But by day 8, it was like, "Wow, I was feeling calmer longer." So that was, I think that's important to understand that trend. Another trend was interesting. So I did the PTSD questionnaire. It's a scale of 20 questions. It's called the PCL-5. And so people answered those. The people who had the highest severity of PTSD symptoms
Hmm.
after the 2-week study, they actually had the largest drop in PTSD symptoms. So that was kind of cool. Those who had like kind of medium PTSD symptoms had a medium response.
Hmm.
They, so their lower threshold had less of a, lowering of their symptoms, what I'm trying to say. So I
Right.
thought that was kind of interesting. So it's like, it just shows the modulation effects of essential oils. And then I always have to share, this is so funny. I had a firefighter that, I went to do the final interview with them and I was like, how did it go? And they're like, I didn't really notice anything. I'm like, really? I was like, okay, tell me. I want to know. I'm not like trying to push an agenda. I want to understand, why didn't this firefighter captain notice anything? And so I'm looking at their log and I'm like, well, when did you use it? And I'm like, I'm not seeing. And they're like, oh, well, I went on vacation and then I forgot it. And And it was like, oh, so you didn't notice anything because they were not consistent.
Right.
So all these little things were so helpful. And then just lastly, what I found was interesting from this same type of, I worked with military and a lot of Navy SEALs as well as Marines and firefighters. Something that they do is they change uniforms a lot. So they would
Mm,
accidentally leave the bergamo somewhere or in the other uniform. And so it was like the feedback I got was, it would have been nice to have two, like one somewhere else and one in another place because they have lockers and they're constantly, having to change outfits or whatever. So
right.
that was a good, interesting thing to understand too, is having the access to it and having consistency is really what made the difference.
Yeah, there seems to be a cumulative effect when you use essential oils, and so you can get some immediate results from essential oils, but then as you use them consistently, you start to see that they have a better effect and a more balancing effect on a lot of your body functions as you continue to use them on a daily basis. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that that's what your research found, and that's kind of been my experience as well with essential oils.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say like some of the things that really did shock me was the sleep. In fact, some of the military guys said I was really shocked that it actually helped me sleep, that I've been
Hmm.
struggling for years to sleep through the night and I was able to sleep through the night. Or if I woke up, I was able to go back to sleep. And another one that struggles with actually ADHD on ADHD meds said that it helped with their focus and attention. This is bergamot. I wasn't researching it for that.
Right.
But again, it's secondary. The HPA access is that cycle, secondary effects were being helped through this. And that was, and in fact, one of this Navy SEAL, he said, I even forgot to take my ADHD meds because I didn't even notice it because I was doing so well with focus and being able to stay on task for the day.
I call those side benefits, which is something that frequently occurs with essential oils. I had an elderly couple that used to live around the corner from me. They've both since passed away, but she had some pretty significant health issues, and I had provided them some essential oils to help with some of her health issues. And one of those I was having her apply on her feet, and because she had some neuropathy in her feet. And
Mhm.
so when he came to report to me his experience, he said, the interesting thing is I'm not having as much hand arthritis as I normally do because he was massaging her feet with the oils and that was absorbing into his hands while he was giving her a service and it was helping him as well. And so I explained that to him, but there are a lot of side benefits that can happen with essential oils if you use them the right way.
Oh, I love it.
Well, thank you so much for being on. I think it's been a great discussion. And I think there's some practical ways people can use essential oils to help with stress or PTSD, anxiety, other mental health issues that they are experiencing, and really just for keeping balanced mental and emotional health that anybody can use. It's simple to have an essential oil that you can inhale and take with you and inhale whenever you need to and have that consistency. Remember to do that a few times a day, not just once a day or once a week. Have the consistency and you can see those results. So thank you so much for being on.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for sharing your time with us today. I hope you've gained insights to elevate your health and life. For more transformative evidence-based wisdom, I invite you to explore my 20-plus books at authorscott.com/shop. Don't miss out on the chance to supercharge your health and guide others to a better life. Like, share, and subscribe to join the movement transforming lives. Here's to your journey toward boundless health and happiness.